Have you ever been in an argument so sure you were right, only to find out you were fighting about the wrong thing the entire time? Well, that's exactly what happened in this fascinating legal fight between a homeowner and his HOA. It's a case that seemed to be about one thing, but was actually decided by a single phrase totally buried in the fine print.
So let's start with a simple question, one a lot of us might face. If something goes wrong in your yard, who has to fix it? Is it you, or is it your homeowners association? For one guy in Arizona, the answer to that question was, well, anything but simple.
Okay, so here's the quick backstory. Our homeowner, Travis Prall, buys his house back in 2010. A few years later, a storm knocks down a big tree in his yard. But, nature finds a way, and the tree starts to grow back. By 2018, its roots are messing with the shared wall. The HOA tells him, you gotta remove it. He says, no way, that's your job. And, you guessed it, he sues them.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The entire battle, the whole thing, came down to how you read the community's official rulebook, the CC&Rs. You had both sides staring at the exact same words on a page and coming to completely opposite conclusions.
See, from Mr. Prall's point of view, he was just playing by the rules. He'd read the documents and was absolutely convinced that because his neighbors could see into his backyard, the HOA was on the hook for maintaining it. It all boiled down to two very specific definitions.
First up, the definition of a public yard. Now, the key phrase for Mr. Prall is right there, generally visible from neighboring property. His backyard had this low 4-foot wall. His neighbors could easily see right into it. So in his mind, case closed, it's a public yard.
But then you have the definition of a private yard. And you gotta pay attention to the wording here, enclosed or shielded from view, so that it is not generally visible. That tiny little word "or" is where all the trouble starts. Does being enclosed automatically make it private, or does it have to be enclosed and hidden from view?
And this lays out the disagreement perfectly. Mr. Prall's argument was, look, my yard is enclosed, but it's visible, which makes it a public yard. The HOA's shot back, nope, your yard is enclosed, full stop. That makes it private, and that makes it your problem. So, who's right?
So they both take their arguments to a judge. And based on how confusing those rules are, you'd think this is a total coin toss. But in the beginning, it actually looked really, really good for the homeowner.
I mean, get this. The judge herself wrote in her decision that, the language could totally be read in the homeowner's favor. It really seems like Mr. Prall is about to get his win. It looked like the rules, as confusing as they were actually on his side.
But then he lost. The judge dismissed his case. So, wait, what happened? If the judge just admitted his argument was plausible, how did the HOA come out on top?
And right here, this is the big twist. The entire case was not decided on that public versus private yard debate. That whole argument, the thing that seemed to be the absolute heart of the issue, turned out to be completely irrelevant. The real reason was hiding somewhere else entirely.
So, Mr. Prall gets a rehearing, basically a do-over, a second shot to prove his case. And it's here, in this second hearing, that the real reason he lost finally comes into focus. And it all came down to one little clause that pretty much everyone had missed.
Here it is, Section 7.1.4. Let's read it really carefully. The HOA has to maintain landscaping, but only landscaping as originally installed by Declarant. Now, the Declarant is just a fancy word for the original developer who built the neighborhood. So the HOA is only responsible for stuff the builder put there in the first place. This one phrase, it changes everything.
So suddenly, the question isn't, is the yard public or private anymore? The new, all-important question is, did the original builder plant that specific tree? And in court, the person who's making the claim, in this case Mr. Prall, has what's called the burden of proof. He had to convince the judge that it was more likely than not that the tree was original.
And you can see the problem he had right here. Mr. Prall's evidence was basically just a guess. He was saying, well, the tree is big and the sprinklers look like this, so it must have been original. But the HOA, they brought in their board president, a woman who was actually there selling the homes back in the day. And her testimony? She said the backyards were sold as just dirt. That's a credible, first-hand account up against a hunt.
And so, the outcome of the rehearing was exactly the same. The petition was dismissed. Mr. Prall couldn't prove the tree was part of the original deal, so even if his yard was a public yard, it didn't matter, because the HOA had no duty to touch that specific tree. You know, this story isn't just about a tree. It's really a lesson about how legal arguments actually work, and the huge difference between having a good argument and having a winning one. So here's the bottom line. Mr. Prall had a really compelling argument about the whole public yard definition. He might have even been right about it, but it wasn't enough. He failed to bring evidence for a totally different, but way more important point. Was the tree original? He lost because of a detail, a tiny qualifying clause that completely changed the meaning of the very rule he was counting on.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought. We all sign contracts and agree to rules, whether it's for an apartment or an HOA. This whole case is just a powerful reminder that the devil isn't just in the details. Sometimes the whole story is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How well do you really know your own fine print?